Hello, and welcome to the female reproductive cycle. Today we are going to talk about the key components of the female reproductive cycle, including the hormones, the ovarian cycle, and the menstrual or uterine cycle of the female reproductive cycle. The first hormone we will discuss is estrogen. Estrogen is in charge of increasing. Under the influence of estrogen, the uterus increases in size, the blood supply to the uterus and reproductive organs increases, the myometrial contractility in the uterus and the fallopian tubes increases. This will allow the sperm and fertilized egg to move through the fallopian tubes. And it also increases the libido. The libido is impacted by a few different things. The sensitivity to oxytocin that increases under the influence of estrogen impacts the libido, as well as the increase in estrogen itself. Estrogen also acts on the hypothalamus to decrease excitability, which increases libido. All of these things are ways in which estrogen helps to prepare for pregnancy. Estrogen also impacts other hormones, FSH and LH, by inhibiting FSH and stimulating LH production. It peaks during the proliferative phase of the menstrual cycle, and then during the follicular phase of the ovarian cycle, the follicle produces more estrogen. It's also produced other places in the body that we will not be discussing today. Progesterone is the second hormone. Progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum, which is a production of the ovarian cycle. Progesterone peaks during the secretory phase of the menstrual cycle, and it works in decreasing. So where estrogen increases, progesterone is going to decrease. So it's going to decrease the uterine mobility and motility and the contractility. This allows the fertilized egg to implant successfully. Progesterone also further proliferates the endometrium, creating a healthy environment for the implantation of the embryo. The hormone of pregnancy, it also helps to proliferate the vaginal epithelium. It causes the cervix to secrete a thick, viscous mucus. This means that the cervix isn't going to have a friendly mucus for more sperm to get through because the body is already pregnant. Also, under the influence of estrogen, the breasts increase in size and prepare for lactation. So every month the progesterone is preparing with each cycle, it's preparing just in case the reproductive cycle is successful in achieving pregnancy. Prostaglandins are produced by the cells of the endometrium, and they're a little less understood in relationship to the reproductive cycle. We do know there are two types, PGE, which is a smooth muscle relaxer and a potent vasodilator, and PGF, which is a potent vasoconstrictor and also increases the contractility of the muscles and arteries. During the reproductive cycle, prostaglandin production increases during follicular maturation and impacts follicular rupture. There are high levels of PGF found in and around the follicle at the time of ovulation. The remaining hormonal influence comes from a neurohormonal basis. GnRH, or gonadotropin-releasing hormone, is secreted by the hypothalamus due to CNS signals. The pituitary gland then releases FSH and LH, important hormones to the reproductive cycle. FSH stimulates follicle maturation and as a result increases estrogen amounts further to enhance the development of the follicle. LH production increases up to tenfold as the follicle matures, and the peak is around 12 hours before ovulation. It luteinizes the ruptured follicle, meaning it causes the corpus luteum. So luteinizing literally means to create the corpus luteum. There are two cycles that make up the reproductive cycle, the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle. Often when we think menstrual cycle, we think of the menses or the period. However, it is actually all of the uterine changes that occur over each reproductive cycle. The ovarian cycles and menstrual or uterine cycle are occurring simultaneously. Just before ovulation, the mature oocyte completes the first meiotic division, resulting in a polar body and a secondary oocyte which matures into the ovum. This is occurring right at the end of the follicular phase. The follicular phase occurs during days 1 through 14 of a 28-day cycle. And you can see in Pearson in the second edition where the figure is listed in the textbook. The follicular phase is occupied by the development of a mature follicle, and the end of the follicular phase is noted by ovulation. The length of the cycles for various females varies, and if it does, it's usually due to a variation in the follicular phase as opposed to the luteal phase. Following ovulation, the luteal phase begins, and this is usually considered days 15 through 28 and a 28-day cycle, or the last 14 days in a cycle that is of a different length than 28 days. The ovum leaves the follicle due to the contractility under the influence of those prostaglandins and begins the luteal phase. The ovum is released near the fimbria of the fallopian tube, and it takes several minutes to travel to the fallopian tube opening. That ovum is fertile for about 12 to 24 hours following ovulation and will reach the uterus around 72 to 96 hours later. The body temperature for the female will peak 24 to 48 hours after ovulation. This is one way that women can track their cycles to see when they are ovulating. Following the ovulation, the corpus luteum forms and increases in vascularity. HCG will maintain the corpus luteum if pregnancy occurs, or it will disintegrate, in which turn that there will be a decrease in both estrogen and progesterone if pregnancy does not occur. Mittelschmerz, Schmerz, is a painful or discomfort sensation that women can feel at the time of ovulation due to the contractility that occurs when the follicle ruptures and the ovum is released. The menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is what's going on inside the uterus during the reproductive cycle for the female. It can be impacted by many things, including illness, fatigue, stress, anxiety, and exercise. The menstrual phase is considered cycle day 1. So this is the first day of your period. This is when the endometrial lining starts to shed, estrogen levels are low, and the cervical mucosa is scant, viscous, and opaque. This phase occurs when the ovum is not fertilized, and it follows the ischemic phase, which is the 4th phase of the menstrual cycle. The proliferative phase is when the uterus is beginning to prepare for implantation. The endometrial glands will enlarge, they will twist and lengthen, the blood vessels will dilate to accommodate the increased blood supply under the influence of estrogen. The endometrium will increase 6 to 8-fold in depth. The cervical mucosa becomes thin, clear, and watery, more favorable to sperm. It's a happy environment for sperm as compared to the viscous and opaque cervical mucosa that was present during the menstrual phase. That cervical mucosa during the proliferative phase is elastic and firming. The proliferative phase ends around the same time as the follicular phase ends. The menstrual cycle then moves into the secretory phase at the same time that the ovarian cycle moves into the luteal phase. The secretory phase is under estrogen influence and progesterone influence. The estrogen increases the endometrium slightly. The progesterone leads to a swelling and causes folds in the endometrium. The cells fill with debris and secrete fluid in preparation for the fertilized ovum. Uterine vascularity increases further. All of this is creating a nourishing bed for implantation. The ischemic phase is the phase that occurs if fertilization does not occur. This is caused by a disintegration of the corpus luteum, which triggers a decrease in estrogen and progesterone. Necrosis then occurs in the epithelial cells, vessels constrict, the endometrium becomes pale, and blood escapes to the stroma. The tissues will begin to shed, resulting in the start of the menstrual phase. The menstrual phase cannot occur if the ischemic phase does not occur. If the ischemic phase does not occur due to pregnancy, menstruation would not happen. Menstrual flow is more than just blood. It's mixed with fluids, cervical and vaginal secretions, along with bacteria, mucus, leukocytes, and other cellular debris. Tends to be dark red in color. The average cycle for most females is 28 to 29 days, but can vary anywhere from 21 to 35 in a normal female with no abnormal conditions. It can last anywhere from 2 to 8 days with an average blood loss of 25 to 60 milliliters total. The total amount of fluid loss will be more than that due to the other secretions and items that are mixed in with the blood loss. Thank you for listening today.